Hi, I'm Sarah Hodges, and this is Executives Uncut, the podcast where we provide solutions for the corporate cycle of hell. And today we are talking about culture, and I'm here with Jonathan Moore from York in Yorkshire. Welcome, Jonathan, all the way from the UK.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to be with you.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. We got to know each other on LinkedIn, right? Because you had connected and said that you love the podcast, which I thought was awesome, and I was very grateful that you gave us such great feedback. I need that sometimes. But when we chatted, I found out that culture was such a passion for you, and that really the culture shift that you have had at your job has really changed your life. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I do really enjoy the pod. I think
Thank
it's
you.
great. You have some great guests with some tremendous insight in there. But yeah, culture really resonates with me in terms of the workplace and how it sort of filters through all of our lives, really. And yeah, I recently moved organisations coming up for a year ago, and to an organisation that is genuinely culturally led, and
So cool.
to see and to feel it in practice, suddenly all the things that you and your guests talk about make sense because I feel it and experience it, and learn from it on a daily basis. So yeah.
That's what's so cool about having you here because, most of our guests, or at least Fergus and I, right, we're coaches, so we're always on the outside looking in. But in terms of feeling it and experiencing it, we don't necessarily get to share that insight with our audience. So, can you tell me a little bit about the difference of what it feels like to be in a really healthy culture versus a toxic culture?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in an organization that has a culture that is healthy, to me, it's one that allows you to basically be yourself. In a toxic culture, in a culture that's driven by self-interest, those the behaviours that are exhibited will prevent you from being sort of honest with yourself and developing and in the right way. And a lot of that's to do with the structure of the organization. I've found that over the years, I've worked in a number of different organizations which have the traditional partnership ownership structure. And they are very much driven by self-interest, self-promotion, self-aggrandizement, and self-promotion, and other things that begin with self.
Sure.
And the direct contrast is that in a healthy, culturally led organisation, it's all about the team, which might sound a bit cheesy, but it's true. It's the common purpose. It's the common objective that everybody shares.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
know that you said, everything starts with self, but one of the things that you said really resonated with you was the idea of self-leadership,
yeah,
self-acceptance, the ability to. So that's the kind of good part of self. So talk to me about the insights there. How does this culture, this healthier culture, exhibit that self-leadership piece?
yeah. So self-leadership and development. It all starts, I think, with honesty, and that honesty is principally with the person in the mirror, and being able to accept those things that you're good at and those things that you're not so good at.
Yep.
And on a previous podcast, one of your guests talked about the corporate world needing people to be perfect, and that's just not the reality. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And so you need almost need the permission to
Mhm.
accept that I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
Somebody else is good at that. I'll leave that to them, or I will develop that, and I'll make an effort to become better in that area.
Yeah.
But I think to be able to have that honest conversation with yourself, you need to be within an organization that has the cultural ethos that allows you to accept those weaknesses, and without fear that you're going to get punished in some way for it. So yeah.
So what are some examples of things your organization has done to facilitate this healthy culture?
Well, there's a whole multitude. I mean, culture. What is culture? I mean, it's a strange phrase, culture, and I think I would rather refer to it, rather than culture, as a set of behaviours. And it's how people behave, how people interact. Simple things, right down from saying please and thank you to understanding the needs of others. It includes the language that's used to make sure that people within the group feel included, feel part of it, aren't ostracized, and feel valued. So examples of that would be, I think, and I'd say those behaviours don't happen overnight either. This is years and years of ingrained behaviour that's led by your leadership team, by your CEO, by your management team. They have to live it. I remember talking actually to a coach in the UK here once, who was doing a change project with me, and she said, we've got some challenges here because they all think change happens to somebody else, and the leadership didn't understand that actually that's where the change needed to happen. But in terms of the language, for example, of feeling like you're part of something, that's really important. And a most recent example for me was when maybe 2 weeks before the UK government enforced a hard lockdown on the UK, our business went into lockdown itself. We made the decision, and everybody, 1,200 people, went into lockdown. Awesome. And the language around that was, all focused. The messaging was all, we want you to be safe. We need our people to be safe. That is, and phrases like the number one priority is our people being safe. And for 4 weeks, we all got kind of used to it, and we felt very sort of safe in a strange, weird time. And within those 4 weeks, the productivity in the business believe it or not, didn't drop. It didn't fall away.
I believe it, because of that messaging. When people feel safe, they're able to fully engage still. So by giving that message to your corporation, they were able to show up. Sorry, I interrupted though. Continue.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely, it's right. I mean, people do feel safe by it, and there's been years of investment into IT, for example, as well, which is a whole different kettle of fish. But that's what that helped us maintain that productivity. Yeah. After that 4-week period, the language and the messaging changed ever so slightly from, look, this business has looked after you, and it's time now for us to look after the business, to look after our financial management, our performance, our interaction with each other, our interaction with our clients and our customers. And at that point, we kind of got used to the fact that lockdown was happening and it was a thing. We were in a place where we could still operate, albeit it was strange. And we've got a drive and a mission and an objective, and this isn't going to get in the way. And I put that down to the culture. That isn't just somebody dictating how this works. You can't dictate culture. It doesn't happen that way. It happens from the language and seeing people live and behave in the way that you want them to. So
I love that. So it's modeled, right? And it's the language of saying we care about you as individuals, and as individuals, please, help us meet our overall objective. And really and as individuals, we recognize your strengths, and please leverage your strengths to help us meet our overall objective. That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's it has been a strange time, but it has enabled us to, I think, adapt, because you have to adapt when something like this happens, but you have to adapt within the framework of your core principles. Because if you throw your principles out the window, then you start to erode your culture and the reason you're in the business and you're doing what you're doing. So adapt, true to your principles, feeling safe, understanding the importance of that culture, the importance of language. For me, I found that I received that messaging and in a very positive way, and I feel that it's impacted on how I am with other colleagues.
Yeah.
The input, the power of it. Yeah.
So it changes the way that you relate to each other. And so let's talk about that for a little bit, because you had mentioned earlier before our podcast, responding versus reacting, and you had some really interesting insights. Can you share those with our audience? Because I think that really shows up in stressful situations like the coronavirus, where people will react versus respond.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that is fascinating, and I'm finding it really interesting at the moment. The pandemic provokes a reaction in all of us. It's scary, it's worrying, it's strange, it's all of those destabilizing things, and it's, in my opinion, it's okay to feel all of those emotions. You have to be able to be scared, be worried, be concerned, be anxious. You have to have all of those things, and that's your reaction. But your reaction is not your response. Your response has to be, well, what are we now, having assessed all of that, having allowed those emotions to, given them space to develop, what do we do? How do we respond and move forward? And one of the reactions, a reactive response might be to make everybody redundant, cut our prices, don't go out of business, throw all your core principles out of the window. Actually, our response is a bit different. It's let's just regroup. Let's always stay true to our principles. Let's have excellent service. Let's have sound financial management. Let's have investment in new people. Let's look where the opportunities are, and let's respond accordingly. And just this last sort of few weeks, as a business, we've had a tremendous opportunity which we've seized and are working on currently, where we've been able to redeploy resource, which isn't the obvious thing to do, but we've redeployed and trained them, and in a safe and very organized way, and it's resulted in a tremendous piece of new business in a very difficult economic time. So reaction versus response, reaction is, well, scary times. Response is, right, how do we make the most of what we've got to actually to keep going?
That's beautiful. So when you have an employee who comes to you and says, they're upset about something, right? And that happens once in a while. How do you walk them through responding versus reacting? Like, what's the process you walk them through?
So I did have we had a chat earlier, but I did have a call with a colleague recently who felt that she'd been a bit hard done to by a colleague, and she was upset by it. She was angry by it, and felt like been treated a bit badly, really. And so I allowed her to express all of that, and said to her, well, that's absolutely fine. This is a reaction. You must give this some airtime. You've got to get it out, but don't let it define your response. So don't act on it right now. Have a think about it. Maybe respond tomorrow. Maybe think about what you want to do. Talk to somebody else, maybe. But respond in a measured and considered way, not in a reactive, emotional way. And the feedback afterwards was that she felt a day or so later that it was a good chat, and she felt like she'd almost got permission to be angry, and that was fine. And on reflection, it was her emotions that were sort of dictating her thought process at that time, and you'll tell me which part of the brain that was. And
Yep.
and that
Numerous.
and our conversations that we've had about the part of the brain that is active when you are in a reactive state, and the part of the brain that's active when you're actually considered and responding. I find that fascinating, and the science and what happens in practice, they marry up.
Yes, and so it's a little teachable moment for our viewers here. What happens when someone's in fight or flight is they're using their lowest brain function. Many people call it lizard brain or reptilian brain. But when you walk someone through their emotions and you help them process them, you take them up through mammal brain, or primarily their limbic system. And when you help their brain evolve in real time. And then once they process those emotions, they can have access again to full use of their prefrontal cortex. And I mean, and it's not exactly that black and white, but that's a general way to really help people soothe their stress response and move up and start, responding thoughtfully again and using reason as opposed to reacting emotionally. But if you don't go through the emotional piece of it, if you don't let them process the emotions, they can't access that higher brain function. They are going to get stuck. And that's the power of empathy, which sounds like you are using excellently to help facilitate a healthy culture.
Yeah, well, the other thing is listening, and I admitted to you that that's probably the part of the communication that I don't do very well. I like get all hands and excited and don't usually listen as much as I ought to. But you can learn so much by not just listening, but also reading the body language, assessing the mood. Difficult via a screen, of course, because you're 2D, you're not in 3D, so that's harder to do. But listening is such an important part of communicating.
Yeah, but you were also talking about the language. I think that language and listening, and in order to listen, we kind of have to ask questions, So I think those three components can really help in a remote work environment like we have today to continue to have that, to continue to build and emphasize that healthy culture that you are benefiting from.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always you that needs to do the listening, because the person you're talking to might not want to open up to you, but you're reading the messages, you're reading the signs and thinking, this doesn't add up. So, using a colleague or a friend to say, can you just check in with that person? Because I'm not sure it may be just me, but they just don't see themselves to me.
Yeah,
especially right now, whilst a lot of it is remote.
That's a really good tip to help facilitate an environment of support.
Yeah, it's tough for us all at the moment. So I think we can all lean on each other to help out. I think one of the things to mention about culture, though, and having this great, vibrant environment which promotes productivity and everything else, it also enables, and this is crucial, it enables those difficult conversations. So you can have those discussions about performance, about improvement, without it feeling like a criticism. We're here to improve everybody. We've got one objective, it's to work towards the team goal.
Yeah.
And this is how I think we can improve, and this is your part you can play in it. And that's really important. In a less vibrant culture, in a more toxic culture, if somebody says, well, what about your performance on that job? The immediate reaction is going to be defensive, and you're not going to get anywhere.
Because they don't feel safe inherently.
They don't feel safe. Yeah. So I must stress, I think, really, that the culture isn't just a fluffy, nice thing to have. It's a gateway to improving performance, which in business is what, and in sports and everything else, is what we're all about.
Yes.
It's about performance. You create the environment, then you can have those tough conversations.
Jonathan, this has been incredibly valuable to kind of get some insight of what it looks like, what it feels like, and how you are implementing basically a healthy culture approach in your organization. We set aside some tips, some quick tips for everybody beforehand. Is it okay if I read them off to everyone?
Yeah.
All right. So, quick tip number one was listen before you speak, which we talked about. And I love how you said ears first. That was awesome. Tip number two, allow yourself time to feel the emotions, but don't let your reaction dictate your response. Take time to process it. And tip number three is when you hire talent, give them room to let them shine. As long as they understand the vision and the why of the organization, they will score goals for you. I love that sports analogy. Jonathan, anything you want to add to that now that I've read them all out?
No, it's been an absolute pleasure being part of the
Yeah.
podcast, and getting to know you, Sarah. Really enjoyed it. So thank you very much for the experience.
Thank you. You were a pleasure. I so appreciate it. And so we're just going to leave you guys with our coaching challenge for this week. This week, we encourage your staff to check in with each other, to have real conversations, especially if you're in a remote environment. It can be very difficult for everyone right now to feel seen, to feel heard, and not everyone's going to want to open up to you if you're a leader. So Jonathan, helped give us that idea for this week's coaching challenge that the best thing you can do is just remind each other to check in with each other and kind of pair off in their own little teams for support. Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
tuning in today. This was a really fun episode of Executives Uncut for me. And if you enjoyed the content, make sure to subscribe and share with someone who could benefit from this talk. Visit hodgescoaching.com for new episodes or follow us at Hodges Coaching on social media. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Honestly, I forget all of them because there's so many. But if you search for us, you will find us. A huge thank you again to Jonathan Moore for joining us on this podcast today. I'm Sarah Hodges, and I'll see you next week.